Wow. Our keynote speaker, Ty Bennett, is a successful entrepreneur and best-selling author and award-winning speaker. At age 21, Ty and his brother started a business in direct sales that they built to over $20 million in annual revenue while still in their 20s. 5 years ago, Ty sold his half of the business to his brother and started Leadership Inc., a speaking and training company. He has written 3 books and now speaks to more than 100 clients a year around the world. Today, Ty is going to share insights from his soon-to-be-released book, Partnership is the New Leadership. Please join me in welcoming my good friend, Ty Bennett.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So a couple of months ago, I was going to Orlando, Florida to give a speech. And I remember I came in, I found my seat on the airplane, I sat down, and I sat next to a woman who I would have described as a business executive. She looked the part. She had a great business suit on. She had her laptop open. She was in business mode before we even took off. I, on the other hand, I was wearing shorts, a t-shirt, and flip-flops. I probably looked like I was headed to the beach or to Disney World. And she started the conversation, I don't know, the way that most people would start the conversation in that situation. She said, "Are you headed to Orlando for business or pleasure?" And I said, "I'm headed for business. How about for you?" And she said, "For business." And then she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a keynote speaker. I'm speaking at an association conference tomorrow." And then she kind of looked at me from head to toe, and she asked me a very blunt question. She said, "Why in the world would anyone hire you to speak to them?" I was kind of offended for a minute, and I looked at her and I said, "'Cause I'm amazing?" And she laughed, and we had a great conversation, and I'm actually speaking for her company soon. The reason I tell you that story is as we start our conversation on leadership this afternoon, I want to start with a really blunt question for you. Why in the world would anyone follow you as their leader? Now, I realize that I'm speaking to the top business leaders in the state of Utah. I know who you are. But I want you to think about that question for a minute. Why would people choose to follow you? Because the answer to that question cannot be because you're the founder, because you're the CEO, because you're the boss, because you're in charge. People don't follow titles, they follow people. And yet, for every person in this room, you have an opportunity to lead. You have an opportunity to inspire. You have an opportunity to influence and to hopefully impact people every single day, and your leadership is paramount. Over the last 5 years, I've conducted a survey of more than 5,000 leaders, and these leaders came from multiple different industries, from every position in those organizations, from supervisor to CEO. And honestly, I don't know if you can call it a survey. I asked one question. It was a question that fascinated me. It was a question that I was just intrigued with. The question is this: as a leader, what do you want from your people? Think about that for a minute. If you were to answer that question, as a leader, what do you want from your people? In that survey, 75% of the leaders came back with one single word. They said commitment. That's what you want, isn't it? I mean, think about it. That's what you want from your people. You want your people to be committed. You want them to show up. You want them to do their best. You want them to be engaged. You want them to give their best every single day. You want them to be committed. But here's the leadership takeaway. People are not committed to jobs. Did you know statistically, if you graduate from college this year, you will hold over 30 jobs in your lifetime? There's no way you could be committed to jobs. I mean, there's just too many of them. And the truth is, people aren't committed to companies. What actually drives commitment is leadership, because people are committed to people. It is people and relationships that naturally engender trust, that build accountability, and ultimately commitment. And so if you and I truly want to create commitment, we need to lead in a way that fosters that natural response. You see, the old adage said that leadership was based on title, position, and authority. But that's not true in today's world. In today's world, partnership is the new leadership. Think about it. It's the way that you partner with your people. It's the relationship and the connection that you make. It's the partnership that creates that natural accountability and that natural commitment from your people. And so if you want accountability, if you want commitment, you need to partner with your people. About a year ago, there was a really interesting thing that played out in the national news. two cousins began feuding over a family business. Now, some of you are involved in family business in here, so you know that's not very newsworthy, right? But what happened in this situation was really interesting. This gentleman, Arthur T. DeMollis, was part owner and the CEO of a 71-store grocery store chain based in Massachusetts. Arthur T., or RDT as his people called him, was technically the minority owner. He owned 49.5% of the company. Now, his cousin, Arthur S. DeMollis, I realize this is confusing. You have Arthur T. and you have Arthur S., but just stay with me. Arthur S. DeMollis, he was the majority owner. He owned 50.5% of the company. Now, Arthur T. and Arthur S. had very different views on how to run the company, different approaches, different styles of leadership, and they fought about this for years. And it got to the point where last year, Arthur S., as the majority owner, he forced the board's hand and he pushed his cousin out as CEO. What happened after that to me was incredible. 20,000 employees and thousands of customers went on strike in support of Arthur T. Some of you might have seen this on the news. Literally 20,000 people walked out. And it's not that they just went on strike. They actually stopped shipments from coming into the stores. In a matter of 2 weeks, they brought the company to a screeching halt. When you saw footage of these stores, there weren't any employees, there were no customers, the shelves were vacant. I mean, it was just empty. It was crazy. And my question is, what would cause 20,000 employees to risk everything in support of their leader? The answer is that Arthur T. understood things that Arthur S. didn't. You see, Arthur T., he approached leadership very differently than his cousin did. Arthur S., he believed the old adage that people were actually committed to companies. He thought they were committed to Market Basket, but evidence would show that people were actually committed to Arthur T. They went on strike in support of their leader. Arthur S., he believed the old adage that title gives you the right to be heard. But think about it, in our world today, title doesn't matter that much. It is value that gives you the right to be heard. If you want to be somebody who's relevant, if you want to be somebody who's influential, who is listened to, you need to add value. It's the value you bring as a leader, the value you bring to your people. Arthur T., he added value, and because of that, he was revered by his people. Arthur T., he understood that business was about relationships, and he built incredible relationships with his people. I was amazed. Every time that they interviewed one of the employees on the picket line, when they asked him about their CEO, inevitably they would talk about personal experiences that they had. They would talk about times that they would walk in the morning, and he'd be standing there to greet them with a smile on his face. He'd greet them by name. He'd welcome them, thank them for being there. They talked about times that he'd walk them to their car. He'd ask about their families, what was going on in their life. He knew them, and they knew him, and they loved him for it. You see, Arthur T., he worked hard to foster an incredible culture. Think about it. In today's world, what actually drives business? It's culture. Culture is the great differentiator in today's business world. It's the commitment and engagement of your people. It's the culture that you create. Arthur T. worked hard to create an incredible culture within Market Basket. It was a culture that his cousin, Arthur S., didn't understand because he never participated in it. In the end, Arthur S. was simply an investor, while Arthur T. was their leader. He was their partner. Well, long story short, about a month into the strike, Arthur T. successfully negotiated buying out his cousin. He became the sole owner of Market Basket. He reinstated himself as CEO, and the company is back on track and doing better than ever. In fact, in 2014, they did $14 billion in revenue, and in 2015, they're on track to do $14.8 billion in revenue. That is the kind of leadership that works in today's world. It is partnership-based leadership. It is the way that you view your people, the way that you approach it. And while it might sound like a cliche phrase, a clever saying that I came up with, I can promise you that partnership is the new leadership is not just a unique idea. It is the actual approach of the most relevant, the most effective, the most influential leaders in today's world. As I've studied it in multiple industries, I have seen results over and over and over again. Partnership-based leadership is built in genuine relationships, influential relationships that you build with your people. Think about it. As leaders, you're in the people business, right? Leadership begins and ends with people. And so your ability to build those relationships, it has to go beyond command and control. If you are in the people business, you have to be able to build amazing relationships with your people, because if culture drives business, then the relationships that you build will dramatically affect, influence, and shape the culture within your organization. I want you to remember this. You can love people without leading them, but you cannot lead people without loving them. It doesn't work. You have to make it about your people first. Partnership-based leadership is driven by passion. Think about, do you have an excitement for what you do? Do you show up and does that come across in what you do? I love the saying that when you're on fire, people come to watch you burn. Like there's something contagious about it that just starts to permeate throughout your organization, but it goes beyond that. I love what I do. I get a chance to speak to companies all around the world, and I live here in Utah. I don't speak in Utah very often. I was talking to my wife about that this morning just because I was home, and I said, would you have ever imagined in your wildest dreams that I'd be able to do this? To be able to speak to audiences like this is amazing to me. And my wife, she got a little smile on her face, and she goes, Ty, in my wildest dreams, you don't even show up. I'm glad you found that funny. I didn't. I have to be honest, I travel a lot. It kind of scared me a little bit. But here's the thing. You have to love what you do, and I'll give you an insight to passion. We think about passion as being excited a lot of times. Passion is way beyond that. The word passion actually originated at the time of Christ. It was originally used to describe Christ's suffering. And when you think about it in that context, think about what passion means. Passion means that you're willing to suffer for something that you love. It means that you're going to be committed. It means that you show up and do that, because if you're committed, your people will too. I can promise you that leaders that lack passion will have followers that lack commitment. That's just how it works. And partnership-based leadership creates a natural accountability. Accountability is one of those interesting things, because when we think about accountability, or when it's talked about in business, most of the time, accountability is talked about as your people need to be accountable to you. And I completely agree with that, but partnership is something totally different. When you partner with people, it's a two-way street, and accountability needs to be that same thing. Your people need to be accountable to you, but you also need to be accountable to your people. One of the things that I see that leaders do most often, or that we're most guilty of, is what I call having hypocritical expectations. And this is one of the things that undermines your influence more than anything. When you expect something out of your people and somehow you allow yourself to be exempt, it completely kills your influence. It kills your relationships. I'll give you a good example. My wife and I, over the last year, we remodeled our home. It was a really big remodel. As a side note, don't do it. Just move. Like, it's so much easier. But we went through this process, and so we had the great fortune of working with a lot of contractors. I don't know if you've had that great fortune before. The truth is, some were amazing and some were horrible. And one of the ones that was pretty horrible was the group that we hired to build a basketball court in our backyard. Big fan of basketball. We love it in our family. And so we were building a basketball court in the backyard, and they came and they gave us a bid. We drew it all out. Everything looked great. And so we said, okay, great. It was just going to take a couple of days. And so we gave them a 50% deposit. They showed up. They started working on the basketball court. They got like 95% done with this court, and they disappeared. I mean, gone. Like, I thought they died. I don't know what happened to them. I called, I texted, I emailed. I mean, it was like they went out of business, dropped off the face of the earth. I did not hear from these people for 4 months. Not a word, nothing. And then one night, we're sitting at our house eating dinner, and there's a knock on the door. And this guy, I open the door, and the guy goes, hey, I'm here to finish your basketball court. Okay. I mean, all they had to do was to paint a logo in the key of the basketball court that we had selected. It wasn't that big a deal. The court was functional, and full disclosure, it was a BYU logo. I mean, for all of you BYU fans. I'm sorry for the Utah fans out there, but so they go in the back, they paint this logo, it looks great. As soon as he finished, he walks up to my door with a bill and he goes, you owe us the rest of our money. And I said, okay, great. I said, here's how I see it. You took 4 months to finish the job, so I'm going to take the same 4 months to pay you the rest of your money. You can imagine how that went over. But I did, and I waited, and here's why. Because as leaders, how often do we do that to our people? How often do we expect them to show up and do it one way, and somehow we have an exception to the rule? When you partner with your people, it creates natural accountability. Your people are accountable to you, but you're accountable to your people. And partnership-based leadership, what it creates transformation, total transformation. Organizations that I could give you examples of in so many different industries. I'll give you one of my favorites, High Point University in North Carolina. High Point University has been this little tiny school that nobody's ever heard of. And in 2005, Dr. Nito Cobain, a successful businessman who went there for his undergraduate work, was named as the president of High Point University. As soon as he was sworn into office, he pulled out his checkbook. He wrote a check for $1 million to the school, and he handed it to the dean. And the dean looked at him and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "This is a donation to the school." And the dean said, "In our 71-year history, we have never received a check for $1 million. What are you doing?" He said, "I can't ask people to donate at that level if I haven't done it myself." Within 24 hours of him being sworn in, he had 18 checks over $1 million. In the last 10 years, he's raised over $750 million for the school. They've grown the school from 70 acres to over 300 acres. They've grown enrollment from 1,500 students to 5,000 students. They've built 71 buildings on the campus. I mean, it's the most incredible transformation you've ever seen. And it started with his approach to leadership. He is a partner-based leader, and the way that he did it, the nuances are incredible, but they created total transformation. Now, here's the thing. In my 15 minutes on stage, I realize I'm not going to give you in-depth strategies on how to change your leadership approach or how to enhance the culture within your company, but I do hope that you'll step back just for a minute and that you'll assess the approach to leadership you take, because I truly believe that the approach to leadership that you take dramatically dictates the level of influence that you have. This is a group who's doing incredible things. My hat's off to you. Congratulations on your success. But the opportunity for the influencers in this room is for you to collectively grow your influence, to raise the bar a little bit, to make a bigger impact, and to ultimately do more good in the world. Partnership is the new leadership. Thank you so much. Congratulations on your success.